There's a moment that flips everything. It's not when you say goodbye, it's not when you cry, and it's not when you tell him you're done. It's when you go quiet. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop trying to prove your worth, something inside him shifts. He might not show it right away, but deep down he feels it. The silence he once thought meant nothing becomes the loudest sound in his mind. Because suddenly he's not getting what he's used to, your attention, your softness, your consistency. And when that disappears, he starts to question everything he thought he understood about you, about himself, and about what the two of you really had. He starts to feel that tension in his chest, that restless curiosity that turns into anxiety. He wonders, did I push too far? Did I lose her? Why doesn't she care anymore? That's when it hits him, the realization that you were never the one who needed to chase love. You were the one creating it. Your energy was the glue holding everything together, and now that it's gone, he's forced to face what life feels like without it. So don't underestimate the power of your silence, because what he feels when you stop texting back is not peace, it's pressure. It's the uncomfortable truth that your presence was the stability he didn't know he depended on. And as he sits there, waiting for a message that isn't coming, that's when the lesson lands. The person who stays quiet often ends up being the one who's remembered the loudest. Keep watching, because once you understand what your silence truly does to him, you'll never feel powerless again. You know what most people don't realize. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the most powerful form of it. When you stop texting him back, it's not about playing games or pretending to be unavailable. It's about reclaiming a space he got too comfortable living in, because silence, it doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply shifts the energy, and that shift is what a man feels long before he's willing to admit it. When a man gets used to your presence, your texts, your check-ins, your sweet reminders, you become part of the rhythm of his life. You're not just someone he hears from, you're a pulse in his emotional world. And when that pulse suddenly stops, it's like the song he didn't realize he loved just went quiet. He may not say it, but he feels that pause deep inside, because silence makes him feel something words never could, the weight of your absence. You see, human beings are addicted to patterns. We find comfort in the familiar, even when we take it for granted. He might not consciously think about your messages, but they become part of his routine, a small dopamine hit that reminds him he's wanted, valued, seen. When you stop reaching out, you're not just withholding a text, you're removing a source of emotional comfort he didn't know he depended on. That's when the silence starts speaking louder than any message could. At first, he won't notice it. He'll tell himself he's fine, he'll scroll through his phone, distract himself, pretend that your absence doesn't matter. But slowly, that space where your words used to live starts to feel heavier. It's in the quiet moments, when his day slows down, when his mind starts to wander, that he begins to feel something missing. And that something is you, not just your presence, but the energy you brought with every message, every emoji, every moment of care that now suddenly doesn't exist. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't chase, it holds its ground. It forces him to face the truth that connection isn't automatic. That attention has to be earned, and that when you stop giving it, he has to either step up or lose the very thing he assumed would always be there. When you stop texting back, you're not punishing him. You're giving him a moment of contrast. You're showing him what life feels like without your warmth lighting it up. It's not revenge. It's revelation. Silence gives him a glimpse into what he's been taking for granted, and in that glimpse, he begins to realize how much your energy shaped his emotional world. Men often mistake a woman's attention for obligation. They think consistency means she'll always be there. But when the texts stop, when the calls fade, when the notifications that once lit up his phone go dark, something inside him begins to stir, not because he suddenly values you more, but because silence has stripped him of the illusion of control. He's no longer the one deciding when or how the connection moves forward. You are, and that's the moment everything changes. Because now he has to feel what it's like to exist without your reassurance, without your check-ins, without that small but steady emotional presence that made him feel safe, even when he didn't show it. Your silence turns the mirror back toward him, and he's confronted with a question most men avoid. What have I done to make her stop? That question lingers. It doesn't fade easily. It sits quietly in his mind, waiting for an answer that hurts to admit. That somewhere along the way he stopped valuing what was right in front of him. And that's the power of silence. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't explain, it simply reveals. It forces him to look at his own behavior, to recognize the distance he created, and to understand that connection only lasts when both people feed it. The truth is, silence is not about being cold, it's about being conscious. It's choosing not to fill the space with energy that's no longer being respected. It's a boundary wrapped in stillness, a message sent without words that says, I'm not chasing clarity. You can meet me halfway or not at all. And the irony? The very moment you stop trying to prove your worth through constant communication is the moment he begins to feel your worth most deeply. Because absence has a way of sharpening awareness, what was once overlooked becomes irreplaceable, what was once assumed becomes valuable. Silence transforms your energy from something available into something rare, and rarity is what wakes a man up. So, when you choose not to text back, remember, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. You're not withholding love, you're allowing space for him to remember what your love feels like when it's gone. And that's something no message could ever do. Silence, when used with strength, isn't empty. It's full of meaning, full of truth, full of power. Because sometimes the most profound message you'll ever send is the one you never type. You know, when you stop texting him back, something interesting happens not just in his heart, but in his mind. The ego begins to wake up, and not in a peaceful way. It starts to whisper, to question, to panic. At first, he tells himself stories to protect it. She's probably busy, he says. She's trying to get a reaction. He might even laugh and convince himself that he doesn't care. But the truth is, he does. He just doesn't know how to admit it without feeling weak, because silence doesn't only test patience, it tests pride. When you were texting him regularly, his ego was comfortable. It was being fed. Every reply, every small check-in, every good morning, or how's your day going, served as a subtle reminder that he mattered to you, that he had some level of influence over your attention. And for a lot of men, that's all they need to keep the illusion of control alive. Your attention becomes an invisible validation. It tells him he's still wanted, still desirable, still relevant. But when that flow of energy stops, the ego doesn't know what to do with the silence. It starts to crumble under its own weight. He begins to wonder what changed. His mind goes into overdrive, replaying moments, trying to pinpoint the shift. And for the first time, he's not the one deciding how the interaction unfolds. You are. That loss of control cuts deeper than you think. Because the male ego, especially when it's built on validation rather than emotional depth, can't stand uncertainty. It thrives on predictable attention. It feels powerful when it knows it's desired. But when the desire stops showing up on his screen, when you stop being the one who keeps the connection alive, that power starts slipping through his fingers. It's almost ironic. He might not have appreciated your messages when they came in, but he'll miss them like oxygen once they stop. Because the ego isn't fueled by love, it's fueled by recognition, and your silence becomes the ultimate denial of that recognition. Suddenly, he's no longer the center of your emotional world, and that unsettles him more than he'll ever admit. The human mind has this interesting pattern. When something is constantly available, it loses value. But when it disappears, the scarcity triggers desire. It's not just emotional, it's psychological conditioning. He starts thinking, wait, why isn't she texting me? Did I do something wrong? Is she over me? That's not love speaking. That's the ego reacting to the withdrawal of attention it depended on. Here's the deeper truth. When you stop reaching out, you expose the difference between his ego and his heart. The ego panics because it's losing control, but the heart begins to feel the reality of your absence. And that's when he begins to realize how deeply your presence affected him. He may not text you first. He may not show it right away, but his energy shifts, his mind becomes restless, his confidence takes a small but significant hit. And it's not about making him suffer, it's about creating awareness. Your silence becomes the contrast his ego needs to recognize the gap between having your attention and deserving it. Because when someone gets too used to being desired without doing anything to earn it, they start mistaking your effort for their worth. And that's where the balance breaks. By stepping back, you restore that balance. You remind him that affection isn't an entitlement, it's an exchange. Men often confuse emotional security with control. They think if a woman keeps showing up, she always will. But when you remove yourself from that equation, it rewires his perception. He realizes that his presence in your life was never guaranteed. And that realization shakes his ego to the core, because the truth is, he didn't lose a text. He lost a reflection of himself that he enjoyed seeing through your admiration. And you have to understand, silence is not about proving a point. It's about protecting your energy. It's about saying, I'm not going to keep pouring into someone who doesn't value what they're receiving. The moment you stop texting back, you give him a chance to meet you halfway, or show you that he never intended to. Either way, you win, because you stop playing the role of emotional caretaker for someone who's not emotionally present. The ego doesn't respond well to loss. It tries to regain control. He may test you, send a casual message, try to provoke a reaction. But your power lies in not rushing to fill the silence, because every second you hold your ground, the message gets louder. You're not afraid of being missed. You're not begging to be seen. You're at peace with walking away from what doesn't value your effort. And that's the moment the ego begins to dissolve, replaced by something real awareness. He starts to see you not as someone who needs his attention, but as someone whose attention is worth earning. Your silence shifts him from a place of entitlement to appreciation, and even if he doesn't say it, he feels it. Because every person eventually learns that losing someone who genuinely cared is far more painful than not being chased by someone who doesn't. So remember, this silence isn't a strategy, it's a statement. It's not a game, it's growth. When the ego starts to crack, truth starts to shine through. And in that quiet space between what he wants to feel and what he's forced to face, he begins to understand something powerful. Attention is cheap, but presence is priceless. And that's the moment he realizes you were never the one who needed to reach out. Every text you don't send carries more power than the ones you used to. Because silence, when done from strength and not spite, becomes a lesson, a message that speaks to him in ways words never could. When you stop reaching out, you stop feeding the illusion that connection can survive without effort. You teach him, without ever explaining it, that love isn't something you get to keep just because someone keeps showing up. It's something you nurture through presence, consistency, and intention, and the moment you pull back, the absence of your energy forces him to finally see what he's been blind to all along. Most people think communication is about talking, but the truth is, the most powerful communication happens when you say nothing. Because silence gives him the space to experience what your energy actually meant in his life. Every unread message that never arrives, every notification that never lights up his phone, reminds him consciously or not of how much you were giving without him realizing it. You were making him feel seen, you were making him feel relevant, and he got used to that comfort. He mistook your consistency for permanence. But when it's gone, that comfort turns into confusion, and that confusion slowly turns into clarity. At first, he'll try to rationalize it. He'll tell himself you're just busy, that it's temporary, that things will go back to normal. But what he doesn't realize is, this is the new normal. The silence isn't just about waiting for him to text first. It's about letting him feel the imbalance he created. Because while you were giving, he was coasting. While you were reaching out, he was assuming, and your silence now becomes the equalizer. It balances the emotional scale that had been tilted for far too long. This is the part most people misunderstand. Silence isn't manipulation, it's revelation. It's not about making someone chase you. It's about allowing them to experience the void they built when they stopped investing. You're not punishing him. You're giving him the opportunity to understand. Because no amount of explaining, no paragraph, long message, no emotional speech could ever teach him what a few days of real silence can. It's not about revenge, it's about reality. When you pull back, you expose the truth that connection isn't sustained by one person doing all the work. Relationships, whether romantic or not, require reciprocity. They require effort, and if he's not giving it, he has to feel what that lack creates. That's when he begins to realize that your attention wasn't random, it was a gift he stopped earning but kept accepting. And when that gift is suddenly gone, he starts to feel the weight of his own neglect. There's a moment always that comes after the silence has stretched just long enough. He starts scrolling through your old conversations, not because he misses the words, but because he misses the feeling those words gave him. He starts to remember your tone, your timing, your care. And for the first time, he starts to notice the subtle things he ignored before: how quickly you used to reply, how genuine your interest sounded, how your messages carried warmth even when his didn't. That realization hits deeper than any argument could, because silence doesn't attack the ego, it disarms it. And that's what makes this so powerful. When you stop trying to convince someone of your worth, they're left with the silence of their own reflection. They start to see what they had, what they lost, and what they failed to protect. That's not something they can escape. It follows them through the quiet moments, the morning scrolls, the late night thoughts, the sudden urge to reach out but not knowing how. Your silence becomes the echo that lives in the spaces their ego once filled with excuses, and maybe he'll text you again. Maybe he'll test the waters with something casual, just to see if you'll respond the way you used to. But you'll notice something different this time. He's not reaching out from confidence. He's reaching out from awareness. Because silence changes the tone of everything. It makes him realize that your energy was never infinite, that the attention he took as a given was actually something sacred, something that required appreciation to sustain. What you've done through silence is something most people never have the courage to do. You've broken the cycle of overgiving. You've shifted from explaining yourself to embodying your value. You've stopped using words to prove your importance, and instead, you've allowed your absence to reveal it for you. And that's when real growth begins, when you're no longer chasing understanding, but allowing it to arrive on its own time, in its own way. It's a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's powerful. Because while words can be ignored or dismissed, silence lingers. It makes people face themselves. It makes them feel what they once refused to see. So don't be afraid to hold your silence. Don't rush to fill the space with explanations or reassurance. Let it speak for you.